coastal range just outside of Santa Cruz, among the redwoods out here. My wife and I are here. We're at a conference center here in the mountains, and she's on the executive board of the conference center. She's really important. And I'm the chauffeur today. And so yesterday we drove in, and she had her meeting last night, and she's in a meeting right now, and so I took advantage of being in this great area to explore some of the 250 some odd acres of the grounds of this conference center here. And I just had a blast walking around and identifying different trees that are in this area, and enjoying you can almost smell the sea breeze. I mean, the ridge behind me is actually the last ridge before the ocean. From the top of that ridge you can see the ocean, and it descends down to the coast, actually the coastal line just above Santa Cruz, and there's a couple houses that are up there. They must have a spectacular view. And but this is the next ridge over. Come down the draw and back up on this ridge, and this is the ridge that overlooks the camp that I'm at. And there's all various hiking trails that are all through here. So I've just been exploring and kicking around and enjoying God's creation out here, and taking you along with me for the ride. So I hope you enjoy it. There's quite a variety of trees here in these coastal mountains. As you can see, there's some madrones stretching out, reaching out for the sunshine. And right here in front of me is a fir. And it's pretty easy to tell the difference between a fir and a redwood in this area. The fir, first of all, its needles are different. If you look here, like the redwood, the actual structure of the needles as they come away from the limb comes out in a flat trajectory, but the needles themselves are not nearly as flat as the redwood needles. In addition to that, if you look at the bark itself, it's quite different than the redwood. The bark is quite a bit more scaly than the redwood bark. Redwoods being much more of a fibrous bark to it. Now this one is a madrone, reaching up to the heavens up there. And you can tell the difference here. That one of the things that you can see is that the bark is much tighter than the fir and the redwood. The scales on it are much smaller, and the bark itself is quite a bit thinner. There's not a great layer of bark before you get to the inner wood in the cambium layer. You can see this madrone has recently fallen, but you see as the bark transitions up to the upper parts of the tree, it gets much thinner and almost like a paper. And it's how thin it is, and it flakes off, it rolls off. And this is just a natural way the tree grows, and as it gets to the higher parts of the tree, it's very smooth. And if this one were recently fallen, you'd see in these upper sections it almost has a green hue as well. Here's an example of a redwood. This is a small redwood sapling along the trail here, and you can see the difference in the needles between this and the fir. Both the redwoods and the firs, the needles grow out horizontally, as you can see, but the difference you can see very easily between the redwood and the firs. The redwood needles are much flatter as they come out from the limb. Another way to tell a redwood from a fir around here is that you look at the bark, look closely, and you see they're very different from one another. And you look closely into the crevices of the redwoods, and you see how fibrous the bark is. I don't know if I can get a good shot in there, but as you look, You can see all those little strands and hairy fibers that are a part of this bark. It's very thick, protecting the tree. And if you are in a survival situation, you can actually take some of this bark off of a redwood and pry it apart and just kind of extracts it so that the fibers are separate from one another and make a little fiber nest, if you will, and it just lights right up. It takes a spark and lights right up. The redwoods here are all, this is all a regrowth. This whole area either had a forest fire or had been logged out, or both, a number of years ago. And you can see all through on this ridge side here, looking down into the draw, there's some very large stumps. Most of them have signs of forest fire, but all of them, nearly all of them, also look like they've been cut and harvested. And the thing about redwoods, they are such a hardy tree that you can, for instance, there's a very large stump next to me. It's long since been dead. Many years ago it was cut down, and it's hollowed out, it's rotted out. But they're so resilient that in the middle of this, you have a redwood sapling that's growing straight out of this stump. And the trees around it, these are all, this is all sucker growth, new growth that's growing out of these stumps. And you can see they're quite healthy, reaching for the sunshine up there. And when you get a tight little grove like this, out of a little grouping of stumps, it's called a cathedral, where they cathedral up, they grow around the stump and form a nice little circular stand around you. It's pretty beautiful. And when we get down to some of the lower elevations in the draws, I'll see if I can find a larger example of a cathedral, little cathedral grove. The trees are generally bigger down in the draws because they have to grow taller to reach the sunshine. Here's an example of a redwood that's been heavily damaged by a forest fire. Let me see if I can get you an example here. See, it's been marked by the Forest Service to come down. It's burned out. It's only half a tree. And if you look up just a little ways, the top had come out of it. And so this redwood had met its end. Or did it? If you look up, you see, I showed you a sapling earlier. That's undoubtedly what happened here. The top of the tree broke out. A sapling began to grow out of the top of the stump. And you can't see the top of this tree, but it's a good 90 feet above. It's really, these are hardy, resilient trees. Here's another example of a fir, and you can see it's different than the redwood. The needles coming out of the fir limb, in this case, are not horizontal, but more of a bottle brush type of configuration. And that leads me to believe that this is a Douglas fir. And when you look at this little sapling like this, I always look around and where's the mama, the big tree that planted this? And I look back, and sometimes it's easier to identify full-grown trees because you can look at the bark and so on. But there's a madrone. There's a couple medium-sized Douglas firs back here, which I think are they're the same as the sapling, so I think that they're Douglas firs. But I don't see any big firs right around here. Right up there you see the top of a sequoia, but I don't see any of the large Doug firs around here. But I'm pretty sure that's what this is. And maybe if you identify it as something different, you can annotate that or put it in comments below. It might be helpful. Now here's a stand of sequoias. And it's easy to, when you're walking around the base of these, to misidentify these as redwood because the bark on sequoias are similar to redwoods. They're very fibrous, like a redwood is. They're not quite as red as redwoods, obviously. So here's an example of a sequoia sapling. And we're going to take out these small branches here and see the difference between firs and redwoods and so on. Now this sequoias are, I'm guessing they're in the same family as redwoods because of the bark and whatnot. Cedars also have a very similar bark to them, but very different growth on the ends of the branches. Now, as you can see, a sequoia, instead of having a single branch with the needles coming off of it, this has a longer limb with a bunch of small branches coming off the limb, and it has tiny little needles coming off of each little branch.